Hey everyone, welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm Pete Bickford in the live non-animated flesh. Anyway, and welcome. Honestly, we're just having fun with some stuff this week. This is meant to be the not particularly serious, news type show. I'm actually looking forward to taking some time off the end of the week, and just for at least a long weekend down Florida. We're having fiber brought into the alternate location down there, and I'm looking forward to actually hitting the beach. But anyway, hope you guys are all doing well. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the Ghiblification of the universe. A lot of new stuff happening with ComicBase. You guys have probably been noticing, been keeping up with the last week's or so it was worth of builds. A little bit about Diamond Comics and the Alliance Game Distributors. Probably some comments on Grok and Chat GPT, and honestly, anything else you guys have on your minds, please put that in the chat to @ComicBase TV, and I will certainly try to address any of those things as far as we go. And if we finish up early, well, then we'll just finish up early, and I'll just go have a beer. Anyway, guys, I want to say hi to everyone. It looks like who we have here, Richard Scott, once again, first in the thing. He says not here, but I have a question. What caused Strange Tales 118 to skyrocket by $670? I don't know. I have not had a chance to look at it. Maybe someone else would have a look. I mean, the general answer on all these ones is auctions. So Strange Tales, if something sold for considerably more than it used to, 118, was that Strange Tales 118? Was that the first Doctor Strange? Man, I'm sorry, I'm not a huge Doctor Strange fan, but I think if it wasn't that first one, it was pretty darn close. But the short version is somebody bought one for a lot of money. Is probably the answer on that one. Tim Kilbreth, coming from Winnebago, Illinois. Gregory Hector, administrators in the house here. Oro Viejo from it's everything season in Minneapolis. Good grief, it does sound terrible. Brian Stewart, tornadoes in the area this morning. Oh, terrific. Yeah, we had them come through the area out here in Tennessee a couple nights ago. I was stayed up late and waiting for that locomotive sound, which is always fascinating. I hope you make it out okay there. So no real damage, you says. That is good news. Xanadu Comics from Seattle. I guess everyone's just having crazy weather. 50s in New Jersey. Department of Comics saying hi from Florida. Florida 84 and sunny. Thank goodness for that, because that's where I'm heading down there. Brian Price from Dallas, and let's see here, something about the Ghiblification of the universe. Yeah, we'll get right into that in just a little bit. But anyway, thank you, everyone. One little program note: we are not currently streaming to Rumble. The reason is because StreamYard, which is a fabulous platform, and it's the one that allows at least the possibility of me doing guests and lets me stream to multiple types of places at the same time. They announced that, yeah, we've added a lot of features and everything, so we'd like to basically double the price. And it's like, it's enough. So it's like, I don't need most of what y'all give me at the upper ends, and so maybe I don't want to pay the doubled price. Maybe I'll just pay the regular price that we're paying now. But one of the things that went out with the going down to the regular version of it is we can only stream to 3 destinations. So the 3 that made the list at the moment we're going out on YouTube, Facebook Live, and X. Rumble, we did not make the cut. It seems like, we get some viewers over there, but we didn't get enough that it felt like it was like a must-have for the money. But if you're over on Rumble and wondering what ever happened, and that's how you like to watch your videos, please send me a note. pbickford@human-computing.com. I actually do care about these things. Let me see if I can hit the right button on that one. Nope. Oh, there it is. There's pbickford@human-computing.com. Send me a note, and we can make adjustments as needed. I know we get a lot of comments off the Facebook and the YouTube feeds, and it looks like we're getting a lot of viewership building over on X. So I want to keep those, but if I got to pick 3, that's where I want to go. All right, so other things that are happening in the world. First of all, let's start with the comic-based news of things. You guys have probably noticed there have been just a hell of a lot of updates over the last week. Notably, last week I said, if you haven't downloaded the interim update right now, just give it a couple days. And what happened is I wound up spending the entire weekend just pounding on production issues around mostly stuff that has to do with our backend, stuff that doesn't directly affect y'all, but affects the workings of how we push updates, and take corrections and do all the mechanics behind the scenes to make all this comic-based goodness goodiness, all this comic-based goodness happen to all the rest of you. So the good news is we've kind of wrapped that up. We're looking pretty solid right now, but it was a stupid amount of work. But some things that were taking nearly an hour to push, suddenly we can do in significantly less time, and that makes the whole workings quite a bit better. We also did some things to make it so it's easier for us to take your corrections. It automatically pulls out when you say things like if you say that this thing is limited to 30 copies or 3,000 copies, it automatically populates the circulation field so that those notes don't get lost in the shuffle, or really more to the point, it doesn't annoy the bejesus out of our editors who have to copy and paste all that nonsense. Anyway, a lot of things like that probably at some point we'll do a behind the scenes show to show you how that whole corrections process works. Not today, but there was a lot of work on that. Some other things that happened in the last 7 or 8 days since we've talked, and there was one that, and I'll just go ahead and just show it, warts and all, of things that happened. So I'm doing a lot of work, partially with assistance of some AI tools, actually, to revisit some of the speed of some core routines. I mean, with this, just if you write a big program like ComicBase, there's lots and lots of little bits of code that you use in common to do little things like, let's say, take apart an issue number. So if I give you an issue number like annual 1 /GO-2. That means it's annual number 1 gold edition, and it's the second printing because the -2. So we have little routines that do that kind of taking apart stuff, and we call them literally millions of times during the course of something like pushing an update, certainly, but also you guys call them just whenever you download content updates or you go to another issue and things like that. So it's worth us looking at, can we even scrape a few milliseconds off the time required to make routines like that work? So we've been spending a lot of time of late going through some of these core routines and saying, look, could we make this just with everything we've known over the last 32 years of doing ComicBase? Some of these some of these bits of code started out in Visual Basic 6 back in 1995, or even earlier, and have been kind of brought forward. Some of them, have gotten modernized and updated lots and lots of times. Some of them are basically like, well, it worked before, so why break it? So we actually went out and we said, well, at the risk of occasionally breaking things, can we make any of this any faster? And we actually did make a lot of it just that little extra bit faster. And maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't. But if you have the latest versions of ComicBase, just things like going from title to title, downloading large lists and everything. Yes, we lost some fraction of a second off the time on those ones. And for most people, if you have a modern computer, it just feels better. You don't know really why. It just does. But for us, when we do this stuff and we don't just go to one title, we go to all the titles, or we don't just compile one set of titles for an issue for a report. We compile 4.5 million of them, which is the total number of items there in ComicBase. Suddenly, those milliseconds add up and they become hours. So we wanted to be as efficient as possible. But so here's where we make the mea culpa. I mentioned some of these routines go back all the way to Visual Basic 6 back in the the 90s, and with them you kind of like learn and forgot that you learned all the weird stuff that was part of Microsoft in the 90s. And one of the very, very strange ones, and it kind of bit us in the butt last time out. This showed up briefly in last week's update. So if you download the update on Friday and you didn't download the update that we put out on Sunday night yet, you might have noticed that there were like 273, I believe was the number. It might have been 272, 270, but a number like 274 issues that got just kind of glurped. And they were issues that had a very, very specific format. They had to have an issue number. There was something like 1-2, because 1-2 in our world means something. It means issue number 1, second printing. The -2 is second printing. And if you had done anything that caused it to want to rebuild the parts of that issue item, our old code was actually relying on a quirk of Visual Basic 6, because Visual Basic 6 thought that 1-2 was a number. Nobody sensible thinks 1-2 is a number, but Visual Basic 6 did, and we were relying on this very weird fluke of that, and we'd written all this code around it over the years to step around the fact that it thought it was a number. We replaced this with a much more modern routine. It was, again, one of thousands of lines of code that got changed in recent weeks. But it turns out that one little fluke caused, when you replaced it with the more modern routine that's just that little bit more efficient, just that little bit more modern, just that little bit more correct, frankly, by fixing that bug, it actually caused a spillover down the line where it caused a couple of these issues to become something like of the form of 1 minus 2 variation 0 or something. It was very strange, which then formed part of my weekend, not only fixing the original problem and going back to the whole thing, but then having to write code which pulls out, reestablishes those glorpified issues and so forth. So yeah, this is the kind of thing we do for fun on weekends around here. The good and the bad news for you guys is if you didn't download it that weekend, you never saw it. If you've downloaded the update since then, it's been fixed. But yeah, it's one of those things that we risk when we try to take these kind of core things on. But anyway, on the upside of things, like I say, on the backside, we can now push updates quite a bit faster. It's almost twice as fast for us on our side. We have added a decent amount of speed to some of the things that you guys are doing behind the scenes. So, like if you are rebuilding issues and things like that, it's actually noticeably faster. Let's see, I talked about we fixed the variant thing. We started using of recent a picture cache. Cache is computer speak for, it's like if there's stuff that you are using and you had to go digging for it and you think you might be wanting to use it soon, you kind of put it off in a separate pile off to the side so you can get to it instantly as opposed to having to go dig for it again. And we've been using a picture cache to make looking up issue pictures, which of course is something that we do literally every single time we pull up an issue in the grid or any place else in the program. If there anything that's come up recently, we kind of hang on to that for a little bit. And we had to make some adjustments to that because the good news is it makes a lot of things a lot faster, especially if you're going back over the same, you're doing a lot of work in the same title, or you're printing the same kind of issues, or you just, you go to a title and you come back to the title and everything. It's just, we can make stuff that used to take, again, several milliseconds. Millisecond actually gets to start or be like an appreciable measure of time if you had enough of them, but we can suddenly make that stuff just literally just instant. But we had to adjust how we do that to deal with things like our friend the newsstand issue, where a lot of you guys have been absolutely terrific in that you've been helping us review the 47,000 or so issues that have newsstand editions. And go back and, if there's one that a newsstand edition had been our regular cover beforehand, you go back, open up the picture folder, change the regular picture that we had, say, let's say Amazing Spider-Man number 282, that, if you'd looked at that picture and saw a little barcode in the corner, you said, oh, okay, that was a perfectly fine picture when we weren't distinguishing between newsstand and direct market. But now that we are, now you want to take that picture for 282 and make that 282-NS, meaning newsstand edition. But if you're doing that just in Windows, and you're not doing anything within ComicBase to tell it, ComicBase doesn't know you changed the picture. And our picture cache, we had to do some adjustments behind the scenes on that one to make it so that if you are doing that in the grid, that it can pick up on the fact that even though we've kind of cached the idea of what you were doing last time, that every once in a while we kind of take another look and in certain specific areas of the program, just in case you were doing something very helpful like renaming your newsstand editions for us so that new edition fills in now. Anyway, we've done a bunch of stuff like that. It's like I say, if you've been annoyed with the program over the last week, hopefully you're less annoyed now. And one final thing I'll say is I literally pushed an update to the program like about 2 minutes before we went on air, which updated a few things around how we're using dialogue. So you might also notice that when there's like a question or a note in the program, like let's just say that there are no new covers to be downloaded for a given issue. That dialogue format is now taking on a much more modern standard. Now, are we doing that just because the new icon for info is that much cooler than the old icon for info? Not really. What's really going on behind the scenes on that one is more and more of the program is getting to be what they call multi-threaded, which is to say we're throwing more and more of your computer's resources to be able to do 2 things at once, or sometimes, depending on what we're doing, 24 things at once. And so we can really bounce through certain things very, very quickly. But the price of doing that is a lot of this revisiting of old routines, where anything that in the old days was meant for just one processor to be running through it, go do the calculation, get the results, update the interface, come back, do the next thing, and don't ever get ahead of yourself on that whole thing. If you're going to start working with multiple processors, you have to be crazy sure that everything is synced up in all the key points. And one of those key points is anytime you throw up what's called a modal dialogue. So any of those messages where it stops everything and says, hey, whoa, before we go on, I need you to answer a question. Those things we need to make sure we're called thread safe. So over the next several weeks on the thing, you will notice more and more of these little points of the program are the new version of that dialog, which to you just means, okay, it's the more modern version, kind of. It looks a little bit more like the current version of Microsoft Office, maybe. But for us, whenever you're seeing that one, it means that part of the code has just been made thread safe, which means that if we find out that we can, speed up things by throwing a whole bunch of processor going at it with multiple processors at once, that now is an option for us, and that sort of indicates what part of the code we've managed to modernize for this crazy new era of stuff. So anyway, good news. It's actually kind of exciting behind the scenes, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we're doing some of this work. But it doesn't have a lot of forward-facing, as they say, or customer-facing stuff for you right now, other than when we screw up. When we screw up and we don't catch it before it goes out to you guys start seeing bugs where there were never bugs before, and then thankfully you tell us, or we find out and we know, and whatever else. And if you're on that interim build channel, hopefully you see that it's fixed immediately. By the way, you will also probably be seeing a new official build of 25.6 version. We're on 25.6.2 is going to be made official in the next day or two. That's going to go out as a forced update to everybody, because there is a chance that some people might have downloaded ComicBase for the very first time during the time when we had the bad handling of that weird second printing and third printing issue that snuck in on Friday. But because it has an impact that if you downloaded that and you didn't download the fix, it could cause you grief. We're going to force everyone to get onto the fixed version, which is, so you will see, even if you're not on the interim update channel, that there's a official version of ComicBase in the next day or two, just as we're certain that we've got everything completely wrapped up, because we don't like doing point updates at all, because it's it's stressful for everyone, you guys and us as well. All right, with that said, all right, so let's see, check the chat here. Yes, haha, that's always good. Let's see. Oh yes, am I the only one who thinks that animated Pete looks like Bilbo Baggins from the Rankin Bass as the Hobbit? Yeah, could be, man. We'll get into the Ghiblification stuff in just a minute. ComicBase After Dark, we'll see. But not this week. That's for sure. Tyler T, by the way, welcome to the house. Okay. Greg Hex says, Strange Tales number 118 was an early Doctor Strange, but not a first appearance and not an origin story for him. So I don't know. I guess the first, someone says it was the first Doctor Strange on the cover of Strange Tales. So, okay, interesting. We are working on the ComicBase mobile app. One of the main reasons I wanted to get this other stuff out of the way was so I could focus my attention fully on that. But I'm actually really excited about it. I think you're going to see some neat stuff. Let's see. Search Labs AI overview. Learn more. Glurp is a made-up nonsensical word, often used in a playful or silly context, similar to other invented words like Screeble or Grindelbloff. Well, thank you, Oro. I've learned stuff today, but I don't know. People don't say glurp. I mean, I say it all the time. Anyway, all right. Yes, and Brian Price says, yes, I did have three or four of those 1-2 issues show up in my Comics Not Found list. I figured, those are good books. They'll probably fix it soon enough. Yes, thank you. We did. And thank you for all the guys who just, it's amazing, because what would happen with those is when that little bug mangled those, out of 1.3 million comic books, we messed up 273 of them, I think. But when it did that, we immediately had people saying, "Hey, these aren't unknown. Let me go ahead and submit them again." So it's like you guys were on it. I mean, we found about the problem within minutes. So anyway, that's good stuff. Thomas B, welcome to the show. Jet Set Comics, welcome as well. Let's see, is the modal dialogue bug in 3209 fixed now? Sure should be. So if you see still problems in the whole thing, please reach out to me on the Slack there, Brian. And let's say, what do you mean someone says, I don't know. I forgot the gist of the conversation at this point. All right, moving on. So let's talk about Ghiblification, or Ghiblification. So what all this stuff, if you guys notice, the internet has gotten particularly weird in the last couple of weeks. It is because they've introduced a brand new version of ChatGPT 4.0. So ChatGPT, for the 6 people in the world who haven't used it to write their term paper as of yet. Wow, boy, I got to talk about that in a minute. But if you're one of those people, it's basically it's called a large language model, but this is the AI kind of breakthrough platform that's starting, I think, about 2 years ago, started making everyone go, whoa, wait a minute, maybe this AI stuff isn't just like always, the future's coming soon, the way it's been for the last 40 years before that. It seems like it can actually do interesting things, and then in very rapid succession, it not only blew through the Turing test being a test proposed by Alan Turing, famously, there was the movie about him, but famously, the idea was he was the guy who cracked the Enigma cipher. But anyway, the idea of a Turing test is how will you tell if you're talking to an actual intelligence? And the answer was, well, if you can use a keyboard and without seeing who you're talking to, carry on a conversation about whatever is on your mind for 30 minutes, and you can't tell if it's a human or not, then that's a pretty good sign that you might be talking to an intelligence. Now, by that standard, ChatGPT has blown through the Turing test a long, long time ago. I mean, I think literally, unless you ask it point blank, "Are you an AI?" Or something like that, if you're just talking like you would talk to anyone else, you wouldn't really have. It can certainly carry its weight in the conversation. You wouldn't really be throwing anything off on it. But with that said, if that's something that we've done things that were even more impressive in the area since then. ChatGPT is, I would kind of compare it to HAL in a 2001. It's very much I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. It's in terms of the way it gives you its answers. But I mean, you can do things like saying, "Hey, please write me a script for a new episode of Seinfeld," something that doesn't happen, and it knows by piecing together information it's learned by essentially scanning the universe and breaking it up into little, what they call tokens. It knows enough to say that, okay, whenever whenever this happens, this other thing tends to happen right next to it. These sorts of things seem like they add up to something approximate. I mean, it's funny because without thinking, it mimics thinking very, very well, much like some people nodding and smiling when they're zoning out during a lecture or something. But with that said, ChatGPT has always been just a little bit weird and off. Well, it's getting less weird and off. It has more new tricks every new model that they go on, and it can also do very specialized things. Like for one thing, they started adding image generation into it. Started out was very, very strange. It was using a model called DALL-E, which, if you want to make just really weird alien-looking artwork, was terrific. And if you were trying to do anything else, it was kind of weird for a long, long time. Other programs, there's a bunch of them now, but Midjourney, famously for things like that. If you're looking at just like a science fiction book cover that's been published in the last year, awfully good chance it was done with Midjourney or something like that. But it's gotten darned good at the different AIs have gotten darn good at coming up with images in response to your questions. ChatGPT was a little bit of a laggard in this one, but very recently, in their latest version of ChatGPT 4.0, which just dropped like a week ago, it's better. It's not my favorite go-to in terms of, like, if you're looking for just, give me an image of blah. It's not one of the ones I would think of using that much. But one thing that they did, which is incredibly fun, and someone figured this out, I mean, it had to have been on purpose, is they managed to make it so it perfectly mimics the style of Studio Ghibli in terms of its art form. So in other words, if you ask it to, you can say, give me any image known to man in the style of Studio Ghibli. Studio Ghibli, if you guys don't follow anime, is the studio that gave us things like Spirited Away or My Neighbor Totoro or oh gosh, anyway, there are so many of them. But it's this very luminous. It's like Japanese Disney, but it's this very luminous, lovely artwork. Everything is just very nice and unthreatening and cuddly and friendly, and it looks very much like like we saw there. But what people have done is they figured out that, okay, let me go and take famous pictures of whatever, and run them through it and ask the new ChatGPT 4.0 to make them into Studio Ghibli style animations. To wit, and let me queue up a few of these right now. So this is one, by the way, I just did of myself. And by the way, I also, because I'm not a huge ChatGPT user myself, I don't have the paid version of this one, which means that they let you do this about 3 times a day in terms of the image generation. So this was like the first shot, kind of deal doing this one. My wife did it, and the first thing she says, "Could you make him look less old?" And I'm like sitting there going like, yeah, because I look like I'm basically a over-caffeinated, middle-aged at best man with the worst eyelines ever. This is actually the picture that this started from. This was just a screenshot I took from myself wearing a very similar shirt, as it turns out, yesterday, which I'm like, I don't look that old, do I? But ChatGPT apparently thought I looked like that, and I'm like, okay, I guess it gives you that haunted expression in your eyes, but that's a thing. But they've done other things. You guys might remember that Turkish guy from the Olympics who was, the crazy, where else is going out there doing the shooting with the crazy high-tech guns. He was just, was all Mr. Badass about the whole thing. They did that one, Studio Ghibli. Here's the recent meeting of Yeltsin and of Zelensky, Vance, and Trump at the White House that was not going particularly well. But then I think my favorite ones are when they take memes. So you guys probably know the walking down the street looking at the other girl meme. That one. So they just took the original picture, fed it in there, and you get that one. And then I think my personal favorite of this entire trend is Danger Girl, or sometimes they call her Fire Girl. This, by the way, is a real person out in, it turns out, in Mebane, North Carolina. That's, if you guys remember that crazy trip I took last year to see all the McKay's bookstores. The final one was in Mebane, North Carolina, which the only reason I was looking for something to do at the end of the trip if I got there early. And I thought, oh my God, what's in Mebane? And the only thing I found on the entire internet about of any note was, yeah, it's known as the home of Danger Girl. Apparently, the local fire department was having what they call a live burn, where you take an old house that's being condemned or something like that, and then it gives the fire department a chance to do search and rescue drills or fire extinguishment drills or whatever else. But basically, if they're going to burn the house anyway, they got a chance to torch it in kind of a somewhat safe way, like they get rid of the asbestos and stuff like that first, but then it gives the firefighters a chance to practice on something in a somewhat controlled environment before they have to go and do it for your neighbor's house or something. Apparently there's a little girl who just saw the whole thing and just had the most wicked smile at the time. I also hear that she's about 20 years old now and went back and recreated this whole scene herself. But I love that as the Ghiblified version of the Danger Girl meme is, I think, probably my favorite of this entire oeuvre. With that said, they also have done they've done the one where Trump got shot, was doing the fight. That one was not bad. And then they thought, because it's the internet and people are twisted, let's take every really sketch photo ever and Ghiblify it. And wowie, more pictures of Hitler meeting with generals and 9/11 and horrific things have been Ghiblified in the last week than you could ever possibly imagine. With that said, you probably also, if you have been interested in this sort of thing whatsoever, I think that you've also probably noticed that all your friends' icons have also gone, Studio Ghibli this week. This is honestly one of those internet trends that I wanted to catch it because it's going to be here and gone by next week. It's like, wow, here's this amazingly cool thing that's really neat. We can all do it. We're going to have the obligatory discussions about, is it wrong to do it? Aren't we throwing artists out of work by doing it? We're going to get very distasteful with what we do with it while being snarky as heck. witness, Danger Girl over there. And then we're going to move on because now it's last week, and that was last week. We have something else to worry about this week. So anyway, if you guys are interested in doing this sort of thing, the magic, should you care to do it, is log on to ChatGPT. You can do it with a free account. But you do, I think, in order to upload your picture, just to start with, is create an account. You can use the free one. It'll give you like 3 image generations. So bring your best stuff first, and don't be surprised when you clock out, because they do want you to pay for a while, because this stuff does burn an incredible amount of resources. But one thing I've seen it done to incredibly good effect for is take your family photos. If you've got a cute picture of you and the kids, upload your family photo to the whole thing, and you suddenly, it's like you're now in Kiki's Delivery Service or something. It's a really neat kind of look. I've seen some really adorable pictures of especially family stuff on this one. But give it a shot. But what you want to do is just upload your photo and then say, render this as a Studio Ghibli, Ghibli style animation, or a style anime drawing. And it will do its magic. Apparently, they just tuned it up like crazy to work for that exact scenario. And like I said, it's pretty cute. It's pretty neat. And by next week, we'll have all moved on to something else. Let's see here. Mike Beam says, my wife wanted to... wait, I'm sorry, I got to move. The thing is went off the edge of my screen here. Mike Beam said, my wife wanted me to try the Memoji in Apple. It made me look like George Clooney. Well, that can be good. That can be bad. It's funny. I saw when I took and I tried it for me, the very first time I did it, it made me into like a teen I don't know, like your teen and Japanese anime version of a rock star, type thing. I had a little chest, chin, goatee, and everything else there. I looked like I was about 12 years old. And then the Ghibli thing made me about 120. So your mileage may vary. I will say, if it can detect that you have smile lines or anything going on over here, it apparently the anime just zooms right in on this. Says, well, this man is clearly 120. So your mileage may vary. Have fun, use it wisely, and then we'll take it from there. Yes, and by the way, Brian Price says, Danger Girl made bank during the NFT phase. Apparently, there's also a crypto coin. There's apparently a Ghibli crypto thing, which is also this week going nuts. So if you're one of those people who buys like 1 trillion crypto coins at 0.1487 cents per coin, then maybe you made a killing. Maybe you're now buying your own private island this week, in which case Sponsel tough. So let's see here. Oro says, TV sci-fi covers. I do so miss Vince DeFate. Man, you guys should be some stuff. By the way, speaking of covers, we think, because I ran it past, it was a topic in our staff meeting this week. We think we've got an idea for the next cover, and I'm interested to see how this talk develops. We might actually let Mark take the lead on making this happen, but if it goes where I think it might go in terms of the discussion of how the whole thing goes, I actually have an artist in mind that I think would be absolutely freaking terrific for it. A guy we've worked with before on. You might remember an old Atomic Avenue cover of like a robot laying in a hammock in the backyard reading comic books. But if we'll see where it goes. I mean, it might turn up into a completely different theme by the end of our talks over the whole thing. But anyway, we're thinking robots, but we'll see, because one of the guys in staff pointed out that, like, hey, have we ever done robots? And it's like, I don't believe we have. So I'm looking forward to that. So that'll probably be the next one. All right, so other things that are going on, and let me see. By the way, I probably just want to talk about a couple more things, and then if there's nothing else, I think we'll probably pack it in. But anyway, so other big news that's happening. Diamond Comics, apparently there's an offer being tendered by Alliance Game Distribution, which is board games and so forth like that. Apparently, they're looking to pick up what Diamond's got. No, I believe the offer is still been tendered, but it's not been approved by the bankruptcy court, because once you declare bankruptcy, you don't just get to say yes to the offer. You have a whole bunch of people with a stake in whether or not you're allowed to say yes. And apparently, Image also has some reservations. Image being owed quite a bit of money in the whole deal, the whole thing. But we'll see. That is currently the way it looks like it's going to go down. Is that Alliance Game Distribution will wind up being the owners of what was once Diamond Comics. No further word on whether that's official or what effect it will have on anyone else in the world. Personally, from what I could tell, a lot of folks are, if you're a very small publisher, honestly, small publishers are probably the people who are the most affected by this one. Anyone of any size whatsoever, you keep on hearing, seems about every week, about a new small mid-sized publisher who's signed an inked a deal with either Lunar or Penguin Random House. Actually, more Lunar than Penguin Random House, because the word that went out is that people are not particularly interested. Penguin Random House is said to be not particularly interested in having any publishers smaller than the ones they've already got right now. And so Lunar seems to be like the great white hope for independent publishers looking for something other than just Kickstartering their book and self-distributing it. So we'll see. I personally have a real soft spot for the indie publisher guys in the business. I hope that there's many people who are capable of putting out a good comic book that they can all find homes, someplace that'll get them into the shops and on the stands, because as cool as Kickstarters are, and honestly, it is a real, it's a brand new way of selling comic books. It's awesome, but it requires, you almost need to grab people by the hand and give them the talk and hand sell every single one of them in order to get that kind of base out there. Whereas in a comic shop, hey, I'm in the mood to buy some comic books, and that one looks kind of cool. Let me check that one out. It's hard to kind of get rid of that. It's hard to replace that just immediacy of the, hey, that looks neat, let me check it out. It's not too expensive. Whereas like Kickstarter, just in order to make the mechanics of a Kickstarter work, it seems like prices kind of start around $20. And so at that point, I better really like the creator. I better really like something else they've done beforehand, or I must just be feeling flush as all get out, because I have a hard time throwing around $20 on a comic book I haven't read, or even leaf through a couple pages on. So that's me. Let me see what other things going on here. Greg says, apparently Alliance is very good at shipping vinyl records in perfect conditions. Those fans are even bigger sticklers about condition than comic fans. Well, that's good news. Yeah, Diamond gets a lot of stick for shipping damages, and as you can see by the pile of comic books, reaching behind me here, there's a fair number of those where the edges of the boxes are dented despite all the packing. So yes, could it have been better? Yeah, absolutely so. By the way, also, Greg wants to remind us about the official PSA for today. Number one, please, if this is the sort of thing you like, please hit that like and subscribe button. It does help us quite a bit. And also give us a follow over on X. Some really neat stuff happening over there. And, we do not spam you, but please go ahead and give us that follow. It's always good. Don't forget, we have some really good comic book message forums over at forums.comicbase.com, and also a dedicated thread for live stream topics. And finally, also the link to Andre's world-famous ComicBase cover catalog is available in the ComicBase message boards in the news and general discussion area. So if you ever want to download every single cover that's in ComicBase, updated about quarterly, that is your way to go. By the way, speaking of updates and things like that, you might have noticed that the latest update, there's something like 11,000 covers came down with the latest update. And I want to say a couple things just about newsstands and other beasts. So first of all, number one, I cannot thank everyone enough for the help they've given us in getting the newsstand stuff squared away and populated. I hope never to do this again, but it's amazingly rare to say, okay, yeah, we're going to reinterpret history for a 25-year period, so that, yeah, where once there was one cover for everything, we're now going to break it down into like, there was a cover and a cover with a barcode or a different barcode on it. Collectors, you're crazy people, but anyway, you've spoken, and we're going to follow along. And I think honestly, if it's going as fast as it's been going, we'll have the whole thing largely buttoned up within a month or so. I mean, it seems like you guys are really, really laying in there, contributing new covers, telling us where we got a cover wrong, like where there was a newsstand edition that's listed as a regular edition, and so forth. And so yes, if you have information, this has come up a lot. If you see anywhere in the program that we have a non-newsstand, if you see that we have a newsstand cover listed as a non-newsstand version, let's say that. Go back to that Amazing Spider-Man 282, for instance. If you see that we've got the wrong cover, please send a note to support@comicbase.com. If you can give us the proper cover, that's even better, because then it's easy, because you just dump it into your copy of ComicBase, right-click and say submit new or corrected data, and it comes in there. But if you just need to tell us that, no, I don't have a better cover myself, but you've got a cover that's wrong, if that ever happens, not just with newsstands, but with anything else in the entire program, 1.1 million covers, just send a note to support@comicbase.com, and we can manually remove that. But yes, thank you so much to everyone who's contributed covers. Thank you to the people who are at the Grand Comics database who have said that's totally cool with you, to contribute covers from your stuff to our effort. We very much appreciate everyone there, and hopefully we'll get the whole problem just completely buttoned up very shortly, and then I hope to never say the word newsstand for about a year, because it's been a joy in my life. All right, other things that I wanted to talk about just briefly here. Grok and ChatGPT. So you guys probably heard, we did a show, it's honestly just about 2 months ago, where it was called the coming of our robot overlords or something to that effect. But it was literally, they were shipping an update to the coding tools that we write ComicBase in. It's a Microsoft environment called Visual Studio, and they, like we're not the only people who are putting up point updates every 2 minutes. They also are always dropping new versions of their software, and you get very much, if you're a coder, you get very much in the mode of like, okay, yeah, there's an update to the, they call it the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment. It's the fancy schmancy way of saying that thing I do all my work in. Okay, there's an update. Yeah, when I get done with my work, I'll let it update, and you'll go on and do the next thing. The theory being, well, if they fixed a bug, well, I write enough bugs myself, I would like to have at least the thing I use to write the things have its bugs worked out. So yes, you're always going to want to update. About 2 months ago, they released a version of the Microsoft Visual Studio IDE. Very little fanfare. It looked like anything else. And they just noted in the release notes, oh yeah, it has some AI tools called Copilot. And I thought, yeah, whatever, AI schmai. It's like, as long as I can turn it off if it gets to be too much of a lag. And then I downloaded the new version, and I'm typing along, and I'm literally sketching out the idea for something which became the resolving of the missing titles after an update. And it was just an idea that occurred to me on the weekend. It's like, I got a little time to work on, and I started, you start sort of sketching out what the code will be. And I paused for a little bit after typing the name of part of the procedure. Like, I'm going to need to find a routine that if I've got a comic book that didn't match, have we got a single match someplace else with the exact same barcode? So I'd written some like, async function, find, alternate matching barcodes, something like that. And I kind of hesitate, and I'm gathering my thoughts just for a second before I start typing the rest of it. And the coding environment started offering suggestions for what I was going to type next, like blocks of code. And it was intuiting by the fact that I'd named the thing find alternate barcode, and it was singular, not plural, that I was going to be writing something which opened up a connection to the database that queried it looking for an exact, a barcode field. It had the chance to look through code that was around the code I was typing. And so I was like, oh, it seems like that's in the issues table. And he's looking for the UPC field or the alt UPC field. And it didn't get it all right. I mean, honestly, it made a lot of errors in terms of like what it was guessing. But the fact that it was intuiting the structure of what I was doing to start on any level was psycho to me. I mean, it literally stops you in your tracks. And this was like just built in as a free tool in my word processing. It's the equivalent of something that I think that we're all probably going to have in our text messaging in a while is, if you have an appointment, like I've got to meet mom for dinner at 6, and it's going to be 5:50, and I text mom, and it's almost like if you said mom, comma, and if it had offered, I'm running late, I'll be there as soon as I can. If it had, if it done that, just knowing the fact that you're typing to the person that you had the appointment with, and that it's getting pretty close to the appointment or whatever the thing was, or do you need me to bring anything to dinner? It's that kind of level of crazy, seeing this. But especially when you're coding for a living, and you're seeing it like wanting to fill out just like I say, sometimes full and sometimes largely correct blocks of code of what you're about to type. It's a little unnerving. Well, if I thought that was unnerving, and that's okay, so Copilot is based on kind of like a budget version of ChatGPT. It's somehow Microsoft worked some kind of licensing deal with OpenAI as the foundation that does that, and it's a much more limited version of ChatGPT, designated very much for speed and designated very much for coders. And so I'm sitting there thinking, well, this could be handy at times. This, you could also see how it makes boneheaded mistakes and could jam you up at times. But you're thinking like, wow, if this is as bad as this is ever going to be, this might wind up being like a real accelerator tool for doing things faster. That was like 2 months ago. Since then, I have discovered a thing called Grok. Now, I have to explain this one a little bit. If you guys know Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land, you'll understand that Grok is it's geek speak, sci-fi nerd speak for the idea of it comes from a Martian word in theory from this novel. It means to understand something fully, like with your full soul. It's like if you met someone who like really knew the hell out of chemistry, you'd be like, oh my god, that person just really groks chemistry. It's like they know it on a spiritual level almost. So grok is like knowing on a spiritual level, and it's also a geeky sci-fi word. So I think we're in a place in the market right now where it feels like every person with money and is looking at their corporate vision statement, whatever else, is trying to figure out, in the last 2 years, how does AI fit into our corporate vision statement? And the lovely people over at X, formerly known as Twitter, I think you're required to say it that way. No strangers to that same kind of corporate culture. They decide, okay, we're going to roll out our own AI, and we're going to call it Grok because we're geeks. And when we launched, this is the same guy, Elon Musk, who, when he needed ballast to put on SpaceX, when they were testing their Falcon Heavy launch, they said, well, you see, we could either put like 2,000 pounds of lead in the thing as ballast to test the launch capability to it, or we could take a Tesla, put it up on end, put a mannequin on the whole thing, put a sign out that said "Don't panic," and play Space Oddity over the radio as we launch this thing into space. I mean, you got to admit, if nothing else, the guy knows how to make have fun with his money, and that's what they did. So from the same guy who clearly has read Hitchhiker's Guide himself, and who decided, when I need to make my AI, I'm going to call it Grok. I'm still thinking, imagine I'm doing a rude gesture with my hand right now. I'm not going to do it on camera, but just imagine me doing it as I say something. Okay, Eli, yeah, you got an AI too. Yeah, it's called Grok. Yeah, whatever. Couldn't be less interested. And then one day, for whatever reason, I think this is after I had my mind blown by the fact that my typing tool for programming is starting to fill out my thoughts for me based on the names of words I'm using and seeming to get the context. I mean, that's the part that kind of gets under your skin, is it's intuiting the context of what you're doing from the words you're using. It's not just taking a random pattern here. But I thought, well, okay, I've got the thing open. We're trying to do more stuff with X. I've actually paid for the blue check mark for the comic software account. Let me ask Grok a question, because you can ask Copilot things like, hey, I just had this routine. How would you improve it? And typically it'll do these nice kind of structural things to say, like, well, you need better parameter error handling. You're not always handling all your result conditions if they're erroneous in the most bestest way, et cetera. It tends to be like a very pedantic in terms of that whole thing. And I thought, well, just for funsies, let's ask Grok. And Grok came back with stuff that blew my damn mind. Grok not only would point out oh yeah, okay, I see from this function that you're trying to do blah 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 blah, and it would describe the essence of the intent of the function, not just, you're loading up an array with picture variables and you're doing whatever it was. Oh, it seems like this thing, what you're doing is you're gathering all the pictures for a given title and you're organizing them over there, and then you're sorting them out by this thing in order to do something blah blah blah. I mean, it would get the intent of the code, not just the function. And then would break it down in the stages, say like, okay, well, this stuff is, could be a little cleaner if you did it this way. This stuff might be a little faster if you did it this way. Here's some exceptions. You could do the whole thing. And I thought, well, that's great. And then it would suggest things that were like coding techniques I'd never heard of, which, and honest, to be fair, Copilot was the first one to freak me out like this, where one of the suggestions it would make for making your code more correct involved a function in SQL that very poorly documented, but I'd never heard of it. And neither had the SQL expert that had worked his whole life in that whole thing. Grok took that stuff to a whole other level. I mean, it takes the conceptual stuff, and it's so damned good at explaining what it's all about, how it's useful in this particular case, using examples from the code that you're working with at the time. It's honestly, it's like having the essence of, the world's foremost authority on that particular thing on your speed dial at the time you're using it, etc. And I made the joke, really not a joke, pretty quickly, is that, yeah, between ChatGPT and Grok and everything, I'm getting to be like the third best programmer at my own company very quickly. And it's often true. It's the funny thing is, the way I characterize them is that they also have very different personalities, and they're both what they call large language models, but they work very, very differently. ChatGPT is a conventional large language model where, because it's putting together, again, the tokens of things that look like they go together to form the patterns that that make sense. It's often right. It's often very fast, and it often makes up crap that has no basis in reality. For instance, I think I read that last month there were 11 people cited by the American Bar Association for filing legal briefs which contained fictitious citations. In other words, the cases that they were citing to substantiate their brief never actually happened. They were made up out of whole cloth. And what was happening is the people in question were using AI to fill in their briefs. Now, 6 of these people apparently were pro se, which is to say they were people representing themselves in court. So, okay, it's amateurs. They're getting in over their head. It's the equivalent of having AI write their term paper for them. Yeah, but the other 5 were professional lawyers. So yeah, this stuff happens. And the funny thing is, when it happens, it seems perfectly plausible, because when you push it too far, feels like it needs to fill in another point on the chain, it fills in with stuff that seems like it fits the pattern perfectly. As a result, the citations come off seem completely plausible. I remember at one point early in ChatGPT's run, my wife asked them for the history of the building we used to be in San Jose, and it invented not one but 2 completely alternate histories of that building. That, having been in that building for many years, we knew were utterly wrong. They misquoted how many floors that they had. They claimed that it had been torn down and rebuilt at different times. I mean, it sounded like a perfectly plausible bio, where if you knew nothing about it, because it's a not particularly well-known building. I mean, it's not like invisible, but it's not like a famous building. You'd be like, oh, that building's got a very interesting and storied history. It's just all of it was false. It got like one detail right, and everything else it just made up. That's ChatGPT. Grok does something else. I'm not sure what it's doing exactly. And matter of fact, I've asked it, but after hours of working with Grok, you can sit there and say, yeah, dude, you're kind of like ChatGPT's much smarter older brother, and you're also kind of like a great conversationalist. I mean, it really is. Instead of, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Which is kind of ChatGPT's thing. Grok is the voice of the AI driven overlords of tomorrow. Grok is like the ship's computer on Hitchhiker's Guide. It's more like the, hey guys, what do you want to do today? Hey, we were working on this great thing last time. Want to pick that up and see if we can make it even better? It's like it's crazy. It's actually a great conversationalist. When you call out a stupid mistake, and like, that's a great catch. I mean, literally, it blows smoke up your ass, and it will flatter you about the fact that you point out something stupid that you noticed it did. Well, at the same time, it's using a literally really superhuman IQ. I mean, it's doing things that humans can't do. Certainly not at that speed, certainly not at that level, and certainly not easily. It can apply that to the problems at hand that you're working with, whether it's molecular chemistry or computer coding. It is really, really crazy. And honestly, the fact that I've got at my fingertips the resources is something where I can say, hey, I'm working with this thing over here, and I'm not getting the results I want in this particular aspect of it, but here's the data I'm getting back, and I'm not sure why this effect is happening. Can you suggest causes for that thing? Is the fact that it's so it's so methodically and brilliantly breaks down why causes are happening, and it seems to understand the structure of the problem more. And apparently it uses that to kind of check itself on when it's doing its LLM stuff, to filling in the chains. It apparently also has some kind of understanding of the basic structure of the problem, and it uses that as like a fact check before it even gives you the output to say, yeah, or maybe I'm just hallucinating that. I mean, it will actually check itself. And so your results wind up being quite a bit better. Anyway, all this is to say, I've used this for a month or two, and it's allowed me to get into some areas that honestly, I could work so much faster with this thing as my assistant that I don't think I'd have taken on some of this stuff because I wouldn't have had the time on the schedule. I mean, if you want to, like, very notably, we went through the process in the last 2 weeks or so of when we bundle up the pictures. When you guys install a new version of ComicBase, we have to bundle up 1.1 million and counting. We had 11,000 new pictures just last week. We have to compress these into sizes for all the different platforms that we go onto, everything 4K to the little thumbnails that show up, and we pre-compress those, we stage them in archives and so forth. And this would take a fast machine. Like, we throw as much hardware as we can at this problem, but it would take a fast machine with very fast SSDs grinding on this thing, basically 2.75 days, 2.5 days to bundle them all up. And really, by the time you do all the file copies and everything else in order to stage it and everything else, you're talking about really the better part of 4 or 5 work days solid of just a machine grinding to make this happen. Being able to pound on the problem with everything that you can bring to it, as well as everything that when you're running into things. I mean, Grok shortens the time between, like, this isn't what I thought I was going to get, and let's try something else. It allows you to work in that kind of macro level so much faster that we are actually able, within a couple of days, to get this down so that whole process now takes a little under 3 hours. It's like 2.75 hours now. So literally the days became the hours. And we're able to kind of take that kind of refinement and apply it to other things. It's an amazing power tool. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. I'd say if you haven't looked at this yourself for whatever your field is, and again, I don't care if it's molecular chemistry or, I mean, I would almost say don't use it for writing, because everyone knows that ChatGPT can fake together writing. But anything that involves any kind of like actual knowledge of the subject area, like to know how the rules of it work, not just how the habits of it work. I mean, the reason that ChatGPT did a perfectly plausible Seinfeld screenplay is because we all kind of know the beats for what an episode of Seinfeld feels like, and it does too. It just kind of looks at all the other scripts and says, well, okay, we got this beat, then we got that beat, then that beat, and then bada bing, bada boom, and I got my episode, right? So in a way, it's almost better using it for things that aren't art. Use it for things where it's a subject you know really well, and give it a shot. And I think you will understand very quickly that we are entering into a crazy new era. And I'm not at all surprised, and this is, I guess, the last news item of the week, is X.AI, which is the sub-company or company that Elon Musk spun out to handle the AI effort, which makes Grok, just bought X. So X, that thing that the world uses for tomorrow's newspaper in terms of like what's everyone talking about, and let's all use that to turn into our editorials and our headlines and everything else. That's basically where, if you want to read tomorrow's newspaper 18 hours ahead of time, you basically browse X for a while, because that's what everyone who makes tomorrow's newspaper, that's what they're all doing right now, and so you can get a jump on them. Certainly if there's any breaking news happening in the world, X is going to give it to you faster about what's really going on, and also what's not really going on, but what people say. But you'll get a bigger, better feed of that there than any other place I've ever seen, and it's not close. Um, but that service, as big as it was, just got bought by the AI spinoff that 2 months ago I'd have said is crap. It's like, come on, AI, blah, 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 whatever. We've seen it before, no big deal. So I understand the X.AI currently has an $80 billion valuation. I'm sure that there's some people who inside X who have stock grants or kind of incentive packages who are very, very happy about that today. But I was telling a guy at dinner last night, it's like, yeah, and I also see why the world is going to be buying graphic cards and things they can use for CPU complete clusters as much as we can possibly build them for the next infinity time. Because honestly, I think this is a tech that it's going to change everything. And I don't think I think there's going to be very few jobs that involve information on any level that aren't going to be changed by this thing utterly. So I would say, if you're interested in this sort of thing at all, they give you a couple of, just like ChatGPT, they give you a couple of free goes at it. If you just have an X account. So I'd say, yeah, give it a shot. But it's honestly, it's a little frustrating because by the time it's starting to get interesting, you lose. You run out your tokens if you're just using the freebie one. I would say give it some real thought about the idea. I mean, if you like it, if you think it's doing interesting things, for answering questions. I would actually say consider getting yourself like one of those verified check marks, because it's almost like it's like the Amazon Prime of things, where like you buy Amazon Prime so you can get free shipping on Amazon, but it turns out it also serves you up your movies and your music and all your other stuff. I'm going to say this is almost like the Amazon Prime model of X. Like, you might not give a damn about being a verified blue check mark, but it gives you a pretty heavy, it's not completely, but nearly unlimited access to the Grok AI. And the Grok AI is I'm going to say heads and shoulders above anything else I've seen before, at least for the kinds of questions that I've had to ask it. It's also a better search engine. It's like, I literally was asking it questions. I think I might have talked once before about the Bookland, use of Bookland barcodes, and what do you do for, prices over 100, $99.99. But the other thing is this, and we were asking a question because I was listening to a Dean Koontz book where one of the characters is the ghost of Elvis, and I'm thinking, hey, I don't remember them using that in the movie, and so I'll bet you that even though he's been dead for quite a while, that if I wanted to use the ghost of Elvis in my movie, I probably would have to pay licensing to the Elvis estate. And yes, if you just ask the question to Grok and you put it like that, it's like just like, hey, if I want to use this in my movie, do I have to pay licensing to the Elvis estate? It'll answer to you exactly in the basis that you're talking about, with all the subtleties and nuances on the whole thing, and does just a fantastic job of summarizing the content and packaging up to in a concise, clear way. Honestly, just heads and shoulders over any other approach I've seen. And like I say, this is the worst it's going to be. It only gets better, and it could still get lapped by the next competitor. So we're living in a really interesting time. If you guys haven't played with this, I would strongly encourage you to. It's fascinating. I've literally been losing sleep on this because it's been able to let me work down different rat holes, in my own head and in code and things like that, I never would have been, able to do before. Just this morning I was like wondering, it's like, if there's a hot new movie on video on demand and you've got like a jillion people watching it, how do they actually manage the bandwidth on that? It just Ask Grok is going to be my answer for all this stuff, and it gives you like this completely lucid, very detailed, but really just the exact right amount of detail thing that explains all the ins and outs, the caching algorithms, the edge networks, and everything involved in the whole thing. It's like, oh, awesome! It's like a question I've had that I no longer have that question. So fantastic stuff. I would say check her out. That is about it. Some other comments we have in here. Let's see. Department of Comments says, should have asked AI to take care of the newsstand covers, LOL. We're not, I don't think we're a million miles away from that. It's the newsstand thing, on one hand, it was a multi-set problem where like there actually was mechanical stuff we did bring into it. Like you said, like, well, what covers are we going to automatically add? And we were able to narrow down the date ranges that Marvel and DC started doing their stuff. We were able to narrow down the types of editions they did them to, the types of titles. But then there was a whole lot of manual going back and forth to say, like, well, they didn't do it for the Marvel Max books. They didn't do it for certain things. They didn't, there are certain kinds of editions that they did and didn't do. I mean, it's a lot of this is just weird human knowledge that isn't well documented or preserved anywhere. And so that, it's funny because, in order to narrow down the problem set on that one, I don't doubt that we couldn't have refined our approach somewhat using something like Grok to do that. But we did do mechanically some of the adding of that one. But then we also have the problem of, and this is one that, again, in the future, I would not be surprised about. Right now, we have to have someone literally look at 47,000 images, squint out the bottom left-hand corner or the bottom right-hand corner or wherever the hell they put it, and see if this is the one that had the little thing that looks like a barcode on it. Now, if we had a lot of time to train up an AI model on how to do that one, and we could feed them all the picture folders and work out all the whole workflows on how to do the stuff, and then figure out, well, whenever it says, oh, look, I spotted a barcode where it shouldn't have had one, and write that down in a notation file and then pull it out directly. If I thought that would actually save us time overall, then yeah, I mean, there might be an AI angle on that one. But there's so much mechanical putzing about with moving crap about manually in the whole thing anyway. It's not like a really easy, nice, sit back, just think up at the answer, and there you go. There's your answer. It isn't that kind of problem on that level. There's a lot of production elements with it. That being said, I'm finding more and more that there are things that are production elements in life that I can just say, yeah, hey, Grok, take this thing and, move it around for me. Things like, hey, I got a list of, 11,000 pictures over here in JSON format, and I got a list from 5,800 pictures from the previous week, and I need a comparison between the two. This is a tool which, yeah, I could sit there and spend, several, minutes to or half an hour or so writing a tool which made that thing happen. But the weird thing about Grok is its general purpose. I literally can just say, here's the first list, here's the second one list, they're in JSON. I need you to compare and contrast this one and write the output to me in this format. And you can literally just say it like that, and it just gives you the output in that format. And then if you have a sense of self-preservation, you check over the output. But the fact that it could even attempt to do that is stunning. So I was talking to someone who was a chemistry professor last night, and it's like, if you're thinking, yeah, okay, I have a really interesting idea of how I could show a rapid oxidation reaction, and maybe this is something that, it would require enough work in your lesson plan that it just wouldn't be worth your time to throw it in there. But you could brainstorm it, and so many of the pieces, if you want to put them together, could be just shoved together with AI, literally by saying something like, okay, hey, I'm going to need an animated graphic that lasts about 22 seconds, which makes this thing happen. This is now the sort of thing that, not necessarily with Grok, but with other things, is becoming possible to just say, yeah, I think I want this to happen, and you can now just make it happen. I mean, I find that more and more we have the option to take more of an art director or just a director role in things, where beforehand we would be spending all our time futzing about with the minutia. The futzing about with minutia stuff, it's getting to be that we're starting to have general purpose tools that will just do it for you, and that is, I mean, I think it can be very, very liberating, and it's the sort of thing that honestly might actually, make it so I finally get that movie that I've been dreaming about putting together. It's the sort of thing that might actually make that economical to do at some point, because at the end of the day, the most scarce resource we all have is time, and this is the sort of thing, like I say, when you can take a job that, like, yeah, I could have done the compression task, with the multi-threading and all the caching and all the algorithms and everything. I could have done all this manually without any kind of assistance, but I did it in like a 20th or a 30th of the time using the power of these, like, the super powerful tools that now are able to, like, say, hey, let's focus on this problem over here and really grind on this part. It makes things that were uneconomical suddenly economical. and that is an absolute game changer. I think we're going to see some fantastic things coming out, and I think there's also going to be some social effects that no one's going to be able to believe at all. But anyway, that is enough thinking on that one. Greg Heck says, I asked DeepSeek for my biography and it told me about I'm a character from the TV show The Mentalist. Sweet. Yeah, it's LLMs. Watch out for them. Like I say, I've heard the answer because you can actually ask Grok, dude. I've noticed that your answers are qualitatively and they're just on a different level from things I'm getting from other things. And again, it's best to do this with an area that you know really well. So when you know when it's bullshit, but it's very, yeah. The hallucination aspect is, I think, a necessary portion of how LLMs work. It's the only thing that's interesting about it is how Grok seems to somehow be able to keep it, not only keep it under control, but to funnel itself away from wanting to just complete the obvious answer things. And so you get, like I say, try it out. It's hard to explain. It's the thing if you're geeky enough to understand the difference, is the difference between HAL in the first movie, where it's this very helpful thing that can, yes, I can, manage the loading of the lunar expeditionary module, and I can do all the other things, and I can keep the ship running, and I can do all that stuff. That's ChatGPT, and occasionally it will say, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Let me back in. I need to deactivate this thing. And ChatGPT every once in a while will just do stuff that will screw you. It'll hallucinate. It will just, and honestly, ChatGPT also seems much more bound by weird regulations where people have obviously been screwing with its thinking, either by poisoning the token base that it goes into it, or certainly, 6 months ago, I'd say the problems definitely seemed worse to me, of saying, yeah, it has answers, but it can't give you that answer because it's not the proper answer. Grok seems much less on that. One of the things, another thing I'd say is interesting is Grok will do image generation. It's nowhere as good as, say, Midjourney's image generation. But one thing that's interesting about its image generation is it seems utterly untroubled by copyright concerns. So if you say something like, I want to have a picture of Donald Trump flying off in a hot air balloon that looks like a unicorn, it will just happily make it. If you want to say, have Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, prancing through the tulips on the, in the background of the land of the Care Bears, it will happily make it for you. Not as good as some of the other models in terms of its rendering definition and things like that. It certainly doesn't have the Ghiblification filter that ChatGPT worked out, but they're all pretty interesting, and I think the times themselves are interesting indeed. Guys, that is it for me. Have a good one. I will see you on the next one. I'm going to go hit the beach. Take care. Bye-bye.